hopeful. I want you to see who I was, what I was fighting, what I lost when I chose wrong. And I want you to see that losing you broke something in me that I've spent 10 years trying to fix. Daniel took the journal with shaking hands. The pages were filled with Ethan's precise handwriting, sketches in the margins, pressed flowers, ticket stubs from movies they'd seen together. It was a roadmap of their relationship from Ethan's perspective. Daniel wasn't sure he was ready for the journey. Can I read it? He asked. That's why I brought it. Daniel turned to the first entry, dated September 15th, 10 years ago. The day they met someone today. Daniel Harper, architecture student, coffee addict, has a smile that could light up a room. We talked for 3 hours in the library, and I forgot I was supposed to be terrified of feeling this way. Note to self. This is either the best or worst thing that's ever happened to me. Possibly both. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He flipped through the pages, watching their relationship unfold in Ethan's words and sketches. The first kiss. The first night together. The moment Ethan realized he was in love. Then the tone shifted. Entries about his father's visit, about family dinners where Daniel wasn't welcome, about the growing pressure to conform. The handwriting became messier, more frantic. Dad found out. He knows about Daniel. Threatened to cut me off completely if I don't end it. Says I'm throwing away my future for a phase. Called me weak, disgusting, shameful. Part of me wants to tell him to go to hell. But what if he's right? What if I am weak? What if I can't survive without the safety net he provides? Daniel deserves someone braver. Someone whole. I'm neither of those things. Daniel's hands shook as he read the final entries before Ethan left. I'm going to lose him. I can see it coming. I'm withdrawing, pulling away, and he knows something's wrong, but I can't tell him. Can't admit that I'm choosing money and approval over love. What kind of person does that make me? Tomorrow, I'm going to break both our hearts. God, I hate myself. The last entry was dated the day after Ethan left. I did it. I left him. Saw the look on his face when I walked out and wanted to die. This is what cowardice looks like. A man who had everything and threw it away because he was too afraid to fight for it. Daniel, if you ever somehow read this, I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I wasn't strong enough to deserve you. Daniel closed the journal, tears streaming down his face. Ethan sat motionless beside him, his own eyes wet. I was a coward, Ethan said, his voice breaking. I chose wrong, and I've lived with that choice every single day since. Why didn't you come back sooner? Daniel asked. Why wait 10 years? Because I needed to become someone worthy of a second chance. Someone who wouldn't make the same mistakes. Ethan turned to face him fully. I needed to learn how to be brave without you teaching me. To stand on my own, come out on my own terms. Build a life I was proud of. I didn't want to come back to you as the same broken person who left. I wanted to be whole. And are you? Daniel asked. Whole. I'm better. I've done the therapy, the work, the reckoning with who I was and who I want to be. But whole? I don't think I'll ever be completely whole without you in my life. Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. You're the missing piece, Daniel. You always have been. Daniel set down the journal and stood, needing space to process. He moved to the window, looking out at the city lights blurring through his tears. I loved you so much, he said. You were my future, my everything. And when you left, you took all of that with you. I know. Did you? Do you really understand what it did to me? Daniel spun around, anger and hurt and longing all tangled together. I stopped believing in love, Ethan. Stopped believing that anyone would choose me, that I was worth choosing. It took years to rebuild that faith, and even now it's fragile. Ethan stood, moving closer, but not touching. I understand that I broke something precious, and I know that saying sorry isn't enough. I know that showing up with a journal and flowers and changed behavior isn't enough. But Daniel, I'm not asking you to forget what happened or to pretend it didn't hurt. I'm asking you to consider whether the person standing in front of you now is someone you could trust with your heart again. I don't know if I can. Then let me prove it to you. Not with grand gestures or empty promises, but with time and consistency and showing up every day ready to be the partner you deserve. Daniel looked at him. At the sincerity in his eyes, the vulnerability in his posture, the way his hands trembled with the effort of staying still instead of reaching out. This was the moment, the decision point. Daniel could say no, could protect himself, could walk away from this second chance and know he'd chosen safety over risk, or he could leap. I'm terrified. Daniel admitted. Me too. If we try this, I need you to promise me something. Anything. If you start to feel scared or overwhelmed or like you can't do this, you talk to me. You don't withdraw. You don't disappear. You communicate, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I promise. And I need you to understand that trust isn't something you get back all at once. I'm going to have moments where I doubt this, where I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. You'll have to be patient with that. I will be, for as long as it takes. Daniel took a deep breath. This was it. The leap. Okay, he said. Let's try. The hope that flooded Ethan's face was almost painful to witness. Really? Really? Slowly? Carefully? But yes, Ethan crossed the space between them in 2 strides. And then they were embracing, holding each other like they could make up for 10 years of absence in a single moment. Daniel buried his face in Ethan's neck, breathing in his scent, feeling the solid warmth of him. Something in his chest unlocked. I've missed you, Ethan, whispered against his hair. God, I've missed you so much. I've missed you too, Daniel admitted. Even when I hated you, I missed you. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other, relearning the shape and feel of bodies once intimately known. Finally, Ethan pulled back slightly, cupping Daniel's face in his hands. Can I kiss you? He asked. Daniel's heart stuttered. Ethan, we don't have to. I just have been dreaming about kissing you again for 10 years, but only if you want to. Daniel looked at his lips, remembering how they'd felt, how they'd tasted, how they'd whispered promises in the dark. This would change things, would make this real in a way that talking couldn't. But maybe real was what he needed, as Daniel breathed. Yes, you can kiss me. The kiss was tender and tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Ethan's lips were soft against his, moving with careful reverence like Daniel was something precious that might break. It was nothing like the passionate kisses of their youth. This was deeper, weighted with loss and hope and 10 years of longing. When they finally broke apart, both were crying. We're going to be okay, Ethan said, resting his forehead against Daniel's. I'm going to make sure we're okay. We're going to make sure, Daniel corrected. Together, Ethan echoed. I like the sound of that. They spent the rest of the evening on the couch, talking through logistics and boundaries and expectations. They decided to take things slow dates, not sleepovers. Building friendship before jumping back into romance. Learning who they were now, before trying to recapture who they'd been. When Ethan finally left around midnight, Daniel stood at his door feeling lighter than he had in years. Scared, yes. Vulnerable, absolutely. But also hopeful in a way he'd thought he'd lost. He picked up Ethan's journal, running his fingers over the worn cover. This was a gift, not just the journal itself, but the trust it represented. Ethan had handed him his past, his shame, his growth, and said, Here, see all of me. Daniel opened to a random page and found a sketch of himself sleeping, rendered in careful pencil strokes. Underneath, in Ethan's handwriting, my favorite view in the world. He smiled, closed the journal, set it carefully on his bookshelf. Next to the sunflowers, small tokens of a second chance that was just beginning. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. But here, in this small apartment above a coffee shop, something new was taking root. Something that looked a lot like hope. 3 months passed like a gentle Daniel, enfolding Daniel and Ethan fell into a rhythm that was both familiar and entirely new. Wednesday dinners at Daniel's apartment. Saturday morning walks through the park. Sunday afternoons spent at museums or galleries, moving through spaces the way they once had close, but not quite touching, aware of each other in every moment. They talked. God, how they talked. About their years apart, their failures and successes, their fears and dreams. Ethan told Daniel about the buildings he'd designed that had no soul. About the relationships he'd tried to force himself into. About the slow, painful process of coming out and losing everything he'd thought defined him. Daniel shared his own journey. The dark months after Ethan left when he could barely function. The slow rebuilding of his life. The shop he'd opened with loans and hope and Maya's unflagging support. He talked about the men he'd dated and why none of them had worked out. About the walls he'd built and the effort it took to lower them even slightly. They went slow, just as they'd promised. Held hands in the park. Exchanged lingering kisses goodnight. Built trust in increments so small that Daniel sometimes wondered if they were moving at all. But they were. Daniel could feel it in the way his heart rate no longer spiked with anxiety when his phone chimed with Ethan's texts. In the way Ethan had started keeping a spare toothbrush at Daniel's apartment, a small intimacy that meant more than any grand gesture. In the way they'd begun to speak in shorthand again, finishing each other's sentences. Communicating in glances and small touches. Maya had met Ethan again, a tense dinner where she'd grilled him like a hostile witness before finally, grudgingly, admitting he seemed acceptable. If you squint and ignore the past decade, I don't trust him yet, she'd told Daniel afterward, but I trust you. And if you think he's worth the risk, I've got your back. Charlotte had become a regular presence too. Stopping by the coffee shop weekly to chat with Daniel about art and architecture and her own journey toward understanding. She and Ethan were rebuilding their relationship slowly, learning how to be family to each other without their parents' toxic influence. It was good. It was really good. So why did Daniel still wake up sometimes in a cold sweat, convinced this was all going to disappear? It was a Thursday evening in late January, almost exactly 3 months since. Ethan had walked back into his life when everything shifted. They were at Ethan's apartment for the first time. Daniel had been curious about where Ethan lived, how he'd decorated, what his space said about who he'd become. The apartment was in a converted warehouse in the Arts District exposed brick. High ceilings, huge windows overlooking the city. It was stunning, filled with plants and art and furniture that managed to be both modern and warm. What caught Daniel's attention immediately was the wall of sketches and architectural drawings, all sustainable design projects. Buildings that worked with their environment instead of against it. And there, among the professional work, were older pieces. Sketches Daniel recognized from college, including several of him. You kept these? Daniel asked, touching a drawing of himself reading in their old apartment. Sunlight streaming across his face, Ethan came up behind him, close enough that Daniel could feel his warmth. I kept everything that reminded me of you, even when it hurt to look at them. Daniel turned, finding himself inches from Ethan's face. Over the past 3 months, they'd kissed dozens of times, but always with an awareness of boundaries, of taking things slow. But standing here in Ethan's home, surrounded by evidence of how he'd carried Daniel through all these years, Daniel felt something shift inside him. Ethan, he said softly, I think I'm ready. Ethan's eyes darkened with understanding and desire. Ready for what? To stop holding back. To let this be what it wants to be, instead of what I'm afraid it might become. Are you sure? We don't have to rush anything. Daniel reached up, cupping Ethan's face. I'm sure. I've been scared for so long that I forgot what it feels like to just want something? Want someone? But I want you. Want this? Want us? The kiss that followed was different from all the others, deeper, hungrier. Weighted with 3 months of careful restraint finally releasing. Ethan's hands came up to Daniel's waist, pulling him closer. And Daniel wound his arms around Ethan's neck. Pressing their bodies together, they moved to the couch without breaking contact, Ethan pulling Daniel onto his lap. The kiss turned heated, exploratory, relearning the taste and feel of each other. Daniel's fingers threaded through Ethan's hair while Ethan's hands roamed his back, his sides. Never straying too far, but making their want perfectly clear. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. I've dreamed about this, Ethan confessed, his voice rough. About having you here? about being allowed to touch you again. You are allowed, Daniel said. I want you to... he broke off, suddenly overwhelmed by the intensity of his own desire. What do you want? Ethan asked, his hands still resting on Daniel's hips. I want everything with you. Ethan's expression shifted, becoming tender and serious. Daniel, I need you to know something before we go any further. Daniel's stomach clenched. What? I love you. The words fell between them like stones dropped in still water, creating ripples. I loved you 10 years ago, and I love you now. I've loved you through every day in between, even when I had no right to. And if we do this we take this step, I need you to know that for me, this isn't just physical. It's everything. Daniel felt tears prick his eyes. He'd been waiting to hear those words, had been afraid to say them himself, terrified that speaking love aloud would make it real enough to lose. I love you too, he whispered. I tried not to. Tried to convince myself this was just about closure or nostalgia or anything other than the truth. But I love you, Ethan. I never stopped. The second kiss was slower, deeper, a sealing of the confession they'd both made. When Ethan stood, lifting Daniel with him, Daniel wrapped his legs around Ethan's waist and let himself be carried to the bedroom. What followed was tender and intense, a reconnection that was both familiar and entirely new. They took their time relearning each other's bodies, discovering new scars and sensitivities, laughing when old memories surfaced, and crying when emotion overwhelmed them. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Ethan's bed. Skin against skin, hearts beating in synchronization. Daniel traced lazy patterns on Ethan's chest while Ethan played with Daniel's hair, both of them existing in that perfect space between wakefulness and sleep. I want to ask you something, Ethan said eventually, but I'm afraid it's too soon. Ask anyway. Move in with me. Daniel propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at Ethan's face. What? I know it's fast. I know we said we'd go slow. But Daniel, I've waited 10 years to have you in my life again. I don't want to waste any more time. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life with you. A real life, not just dates and sleepovers. Ethan's hand came up to cup Daniel's cheek. But if it's too much too soon, I understand. I'll wait as long as you need. Daniel's mind raced. Every rational part of him said this was too fast, too risky, too much like repeating old patterns. But his heart, his stubborn, hopeful heart, knew the truth. This wasn't the same as before. They weren't the same people. And maybe, just maybe, that meant they deserved a different ending. Yes, Daniel heard himself say. Yes, I'll move in with you. The joy that lit up Ethan's face made Daniel's chest ache in the best way. Ethan pulled him down into a kiss that tasted like promise and possibility and home. But as they settled back into each other's arms, Daniel's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. Should check that, Ethan murmured. Might be important. Reluctantly, Daniel reached for his phone. 7 missed calls from Maya. His heart sank. I need to call her back, he said. Already climbing out of bed and pulling on his clothes, he stepped into the living room and dialed. Maya picked up on the first ring. Thank God, she said, her voice tight with stress. Danny, don't panic, but there's a problem with the shop. Daniel's blood ran cold. What kind of problem? The building inspector came by. Apparently there's been a complaint about the electrical system, and they're saying it's not up to code. They've issued a temporary closure notice until it's fixed. That's impossible. I had everything inspected when I bought the place. I know. I'm looking at the paperwork now. My guess? Someone filed a false complaint. The question is why. Daniel sank onto Ethan's couch, his mind spinning. The shop was his livelihood, his dream, the thing he'd built from nothing. How long do I have? The notice gives you 2 weeks to make the repairs and pass re-inspection. But Danny, the electrical work alone could cost tens of thousands. And that's if there's actually anything wrong, which I doubt. I don't have tens of thousands. No. But we'll figure it out. I'm already putting together a legal response. and I'm calling in a favor from an electrician friend to do an independent inspection tomorrow. Ethan appeared in the doorway, fully dressed, his expression concerned. Daniel mouthed, "Shop emergency," and Ethan nodded, moving to sit beside him. "Thank you, Maya. I'll meet you at the shop first thing tomorrow. You okay?" "I will be. I have to be." After he hung up, Daniel filled Ethan in on the details. Ethan listened intently, his hand resting supportively on Daniel's knee. "How can I help?" Ethan asked when Daniel finished. "You can't? This is my problem to solve. Daniel, we're together now. Your problems are my problems." Ethan's voice was gentle but firm. "Let me help. I know people contractors, electricians, building inspectors. Let me make some calls." Daniel wanted to refuse, wanted to handle this himself the way he'd handled everything for the past 10 years. But looking at Ethan's earnest expression, he realized something. Accepting help wasn't weakness. It was trust. "Okay," he said. "Thank you." He spent the next hour strategizing, Ethan making calls to contacts while Daniel went through his financial records, trying to figure out what he could afford. It was nearly midnight when they finally climbed back into bed, exhausted and worried, but together. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, curled against Ethan's chest. "This isn't how I wanted tonight to end. Are you kidding? You told me you loved me, agreed to move in with me, and let him help with a crisis. This is pretty much perfect as far as I'm concerned." Daniel huffed a laugh despite his stress. "Your standards are low. My standards are you. And you're the highest standard I've ever known." The next 2 weeks were a blur of inspections, repairs, legal paperwork, and stress. The independent electrician confirmed what Maya suspected: there was nothing wrong with the shop's electrical system. Someone had filed a false complaint, though they never found out who or why. But getting the city to rescind the closure notice required fixing a few minor issues the inspector had found during his visit, not violations, but things that could be improved. The work cost $8,000 Daniel didn't have. Ethan offered to pay for it. Daniel refused. They had their first real fight since reuniting, voices raised in Ethan's apartment while Maya mediated via speakerphone. "This isn't about me trying to control you," Ethan insisted. "It's about me wanting to support you, to be your partner in every sense. And I appreciate that. But I can't start this relationship by being financially dependent on you. Don't you see how that would undermine everything we're trying to build? What I see is you sacrificing your dream because you're too proud to accept help." "It's not pride. It's," Daniel broke off, frustrated. "It's about knowing I can stand on my own. That I'm choosing you from a place of strength, not need." The argument ended with both of them exhausted and no closer to resolution. That night, Daniel slept at his own apartment for the first time in a week. Needing space to think, he was sitting in his dark shop, still closed. Still uncertain, when Maya let herself in with her spare key. "You look like hell," she said, settling beside him on the floor. "Feel like it too. Talk to me. What's really going on?" Daniel leaned his head back against the counter. "I'm terrified that if I let Ethan help me financially, I'll lose myself. That I'll become dependent on him, and then if he leaves again, I'll have nothing." "Okay, first of all, he's not going to leave. I've watched him these past 3 months, and that man is all in. You don't know that. You're right, I don't. None of us can predict the future. But Danny, you can't build a relationship from a place of fear. Either you trust him, or you don't. I want to trust him." "Then do. Accept the help. Not as charity, but as what partners do for each other. And if it makes you feel better, pay him back when you can. Make it a loan. Put it in writing. But don't let your fear of being hurt again cost you both your shop and your relationship." Daniel knew she was right. He also knew what he needed to do. The next morning, he went to Ethan's apartment. Ethan answered the door, looking as exhausted as Daniel felt. "I'm sorry," they both said simultaneously. Daniel almost laughed. "Can I go first?" "Please. I want to accept your help. Not because I'm weak or dependent, but because you're right, we're partners. And partners support each other." Daniel took a breath. "But I need to pay you back. It might take years, but I need to know this is a loan, not a gift. Can you accept that?" On one condition, Ethan said. You charge me rent when I officially move in. Fair market value. That way we're both contributing equally to our home. Daniel blinked. You're willing to pay rent in your own apartment? It's not my apartment anymore, it's ours. Or it will be, once you actually move your stuff in. Ethan smiled. Equal partnership, remember? That goes both ways. They drew up the paperwork that afternoon, a simple loan agreement for the shop repairs, a roommate agreement for sharing expenses. It felt clinical and unromantic, but it also felt right. They were building something new, and that meant setting foundations carefully. The shop reopened a week later with a party. It filled every inch of space with friends. Regular customers and curious neighbors. Maya gave a toast that made Daniel cry. Charlotte brought flowers. Ethan stood behind the counter, learning to make Daniel's signature drinks with endearing incompetence. You're terrible at this, Daniel said. Laughing as Ethan created what could generously be called abstract art in the foam. I know, but I'm trying. That counts for something, right? Daniel kissed him, right there behind the counter, in front of everyone. It counts for everything. Moving in together happened gradually over the next month. Daniel couldn't give up his apartment above the shop entirely. It was too useful for early mornings and late nights. But he brought his personal belongings to Ethan's place. Integrating his books with Ethan's architecture volumes, his photographs with Ethan's sketches, his life with Ethan's life, it wasn't always smooth. They had disagreements about decorating, about schedules, about whose turn it was to clean the bathroom. They discovered new incompatibilities. Ethan was a morning person, while Daniel functioned better at night. Ethan liked silence, while Daniel needed background music. Ethan was compulsively organized, while Daniel thrived in controlled chaos. But they worked through it, talked through it, compromised and adjusted, and learned the shape of each other's lives. 6 months after Ethan had walked back into his life, Daniel woke up in their bed, sunlight streaming through the windows. Ethan's arm draped across his waist. For a moment, he just lay there, taking in the quiet perfection of the morning. This was it. This was what he'd been too afraid to hope for, a second chance that had bloomed into something even better than the first time around. You're thinking too loud, Ethan mumbled against his shoulder. Can feel your brain working. Daniel turned in his arms, smiling. Just thinking about how lucky I am. Pretty sure I'm the lucky one. We can both be lucky. Ethan opened his eyes, gray and warm in the morning light. I'm going to marry you someday, you know? When you're ready, when we're ready. But someday, Daniel Harper, I'm going to put a ring on your finger and make this official in every possible way. Daniel's heart swelled. Is that a threat or a promise? Both, neither. Everything. Ethan kissed him softly. It's just the truth. Then I guess it's a good thing I'm planning to keep you around for someday. They spent the morning in bed, talking and touching and existing in that perfect bubble of contentment. Eventually, they had to get up. Daniel had to open the shop. Ethan had a client meeting, but they moved slowly. Reluctant to end the moment, as Daniel stood in the kitchen making coffee, he watched Ethan get ready through the open bedroom door. Watched him button his shirt, fix his hair, transform from sleepy and soft to sharp and professional. And Daniel felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. The past had hurt. God, how it had hurt. But it had also taught them what they needed to know to build this future. They'd both had to grow separately before they could grow together. Had to learn who they were alone before they could be strong enough to be vulnerable with each other. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better than a fairy tale, it was real. I love you, Daniel called out as Ethan gathered his things. Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway. Briefcase in hand, smile bright. I love you too. See you tonight? Always. After Ethan left, Daniel finished his coffee and headed down to open the shop. The morning rush came and went in its usual rhythm. Around 11, the bell chimed, and Charlotte walked in, carrying a large portfolio. Hey, stranger, Daniel greeted her. Your usual, please. And I have something to show you. She settled at a table while Daniel made her an oat milk latte. When he brought it over, she opened the portfolio to reveal a series of watercolor paintings, all cityscapes. All beautiful, all clearly the work of someone with serious talent. These are incredible. I didn't know you painted. I've been taking classes. Turns out having an artist brother made me think I couldn't be creative too. But I'm reclaiming that. She looked up at him nervous. I was wondering if you'd consider displaying some of these in your shop. You have that gallery wall, and I thought, maybe Daniel studied the paintings more carefully. They really were exceptional, capturing the city with both realism and emotion. I would love to, but only if you let me sell them properly. I'll take a small commission, and we'll price them fairly. You're too good to give your work away. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. Thank you for believing in me, for being patient with me while I figured out how to be a better person and a better sister. We're family now, Daniel said simply. That's what family does. The door chimed again, and Maya burst in, looking harried but triumphant. Guess who just won her biggest case of the year? You did. Daniel came around the counter to hug her. That's amazing. Damn right it is. And I'm using my bonus to take you and Ethan to dinner tomorrow night. Somewhere ridiculously expensive. My treat. You don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. Want to. You two are my favorite love story, and after everything you've been through, you deserve to be celebrated. She paused, her expression turning serious. He's good for you, Danny. I was wrong to hold a grudge. I can see how happy you are. I really am happy, Maya. Like, genuinely, deeply happy in a way I didn't think was possible. You deserve it. You both do. She checked her phone. Okay, I have to run to another meeting. But tomorrow night, 7 p.m., dress fancy. And Daniel? Yeah. I'm proud of you. For being brave enough to try again. For choosing love over fear. After she left, Daniel stood in his shop. His dream made Reland felt the weight of how far he'd come. From the broken boy who couldn't get out of bed, to the man who'd built this life through sheer determination. From someone who'd closed his heart to protect it, to someone willing to risk being hurt for the chance at real happiness. That evening, he and Ethan made dinner together in their kitchen, moving around each other with practiced ease. They ate on the couch, plates balanced on their knees, sharing stories about their days. Later, as they stood on the balcony watching the city lights, Ethan pulled Daniel close. What are you thinking about? Ethan asked. About how it's been exactly 6 months since you walked back into my life. Best 6 months I've had in a decade. Same. Daniel turned in Ethan's arms, looking up at his face. I'm not scared anymore. I thought I'd always be waiting for this to fall apart, but I'm not. I trust this. I trust us. Ethan's eyes shone in the dim light. That means everything to me. More than you know. I think I do know. Because I feel the same way. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, the city alive and humming around them. And Daniel realized that this quiet moment of peace and love and certainty was what he'd been searching for all along. Not a grand romance. Not a fairy tale ending. Just this, coming home to someone who saw all of him and chose him anyway. Every single day, I love you, Daniel said into the night. I love you too, Ethan replied. Forever this time, I promise. And standing there under the stars, Daniel believed him. Because this wasn't their second chance, it was their first real beginning. Built not on the passion of youth, but on the foundation of hard-won wisdom, of growth. Of two people who'd learned how to be whole. Separately, before they could truly be together, the past would always be part of their story. But it didn't define their future. That was theirs too, right? And it was going to be beautiful.